moving on swiftly to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If hopeless was a word that defined New Orleans based on our view, I think hope and expectation and belief is surrounding this Buccaneers team, who of course have been the kings of the NFC South for the last couple of years. Rightly so, because of the way they've been played, the way they've been coached. I think a lot of people are looking at this squad, Brian, as probably the most well-rounded, or one of the most well-rounded squads in the league. If you're picking out 8 teams who could potentially win a Super Bowl, the Buccaneers are in that conversation. Now, how high they are in that conversation will depend on how far they go. But I think a big part of that is, of course, Baker Mayfield, who last year had a 71% completion rate, was 41-16 in terms of TD interception ratio, and had a quarterback rating of 106. Like that's strong stuff from somebody who has had a rebirth in Tampa Bay and consistently improves. He's a deal with a change of offensive coordinator and different system there. We're still not sure what kind of challenge they will face when it comes to their divisional opponents. And of course, they had to leave it till late last year before they really knocked down the division. I think they were 0-2 against the Falcons, which of course didn't really help their race. But that doesn't mean that we can't look at this Buccaneers team and really have hope that they can go far in the playoffs, should they get to that point, of course. But I think that they will.
I think you could argue the best wide receiver core in the league. You Mike Evans, McMillan last year was a late selection. We had a fantastic season. Godwin has come back. He was a free agent. They got him locked up very quickly. He was offered more money from other teams. He's obviously had injury concerns, but in his own right, he's a fantastic wide receiver. And even with those 3 guys, they still went out and selected a wide receiver in, can you be honest here, Kieran? Edbuka, yeah, fantastic player in his own right. Yeah, I think he's going to fit in there nicely. You look at the running backs, Rashid White, Bucky Irvin, and I haven't. And you called out Baker Mayfield. The Baker Mayfield now is the Baker Mayfield that probably a lot of people expected when he came into the NFL, and as opposed to what we saw in Cleveland and Carolina, and even when he was also with the Rams as well. So this team is stacked. Defensively, they seem to be trying to evolve now into a new striking defense. We spoke last year, actually, when we were in our preview round, the fact that they had so many experienced players and they could lead this team. And I suppose over the course of the season, we saw a combination of a really strong offense, really strong defense. You thought, they lost twice to the Falcons and found their way to win the division. I think the sting of losing that wildcard game to the Commanders will still be there. And I imagine they've been sitting on that, resting on the laurels over the offseason as to how they lost that game. Should they have lost that game? They wanted another bite at the Lions again. But I think where other years we've seen this division be reasonably tight in December, I think this could be a year with the Bucs. The Bucs, for me, are a dangerous team this year. I think if you're asking for a team that could float under the radar, that could surprise us and be really challenging come December or January, the playoffs, I think this Bucs team have all the merits to go and make a really strong push at it this year. When you're looking at the NFC as a whole, I know we're probably ultimately going to decide all this when we do our season preview. The Eagles are standout. We felt the Rams were a really strong outfit, but you wonder about the Matthew Stafford situation. We're not entirely sure what we're going to see from this 49ers team. There's only probably 4 or 5 teams that you could really identify as a team that could be representing the NFC in Santa Clara, where in the AFC there's a string of teams. And I think we really have to consider putting this Bucs team into this book. I think they're going to be serious challengers. I can't wait to see how they come out this week 1 game, because you're right, they lost to the Falcons twice last year. They're going to get a chance to address that immediately and try kind of right the wrongs in that. I think they're a serious threat to go to the Super Bowl. I really think this Bucs team could be a team that we're talking about come January as a team that is a hot team who could potentially be surprised and go to Santa Clara.
Kieran O'Donovan, if we're talking about the Buccaneers then in the frame of somebody who could be potentially going to play in the Super Bowl, in terms of that they have to test themselves sort of steel on steel against the Eagles in September, the Lions in October, and I think the Rams in November. And of course, as well, they're still going to be trying to punch down maybe on the rest of the NFC South. But in terms of their ability to punch up and chase that number 1 seed in the division, if we're sort of expecting the Lions to drop off, as maybe we'll talk about the NFC North later on in our preseason coverage, and we're not sure what to expect from whoever wins the NFC West. Let's presume that they knock a couple of wins off each other. How high is the ceiling for this Buccaneers team?
I think Brian outlined it there. The ceiling is very high. But we talked about this within the division first. I guess we talked about the closeness between the Falcons and the Bucs last year. And, I mentioned that the Falcons, if they can take it 1 step forward and the Bucs take 1 step back, then they could flip-flop in the division. couple of questions I have is number one is how significant is the loss of Liam Cohen going to be? We talked about how he got the best out of Baker Mayfield last year. Can new offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard, I think, has come in? Can he keep that rolling with Baker? And look, I was fascinated looking at, and we'll get to the North as well in a couple of weeks' time. I don't know, is it next week or the week after? But when watching quarterback, I was looking at the relationship between Ben Johnson and Janie Mack, the quarterback. God Almighty, his name escapes me. The Detroit Lions. Help me out, lads.
Jared Goff.
Jeannie Mac, yeah, sorry, I blanked. Jared Goff. And it was, it was really this kind of, he alluded to this like telepathic relationship. You'd wonder how close to that Liam Cohen was with Baker last year, and whether Josh Grizzard can keep that going. The other question I have is Mike Evans at 31. Continuing with that absolute amazing consistency. He's had 11,000 yard seasons in a row. It's unbelievable. But like you look at the likes of Devontae Adams now going to the Rams, and everybody's really high on that move because he's a seasoned veteran going to be a number 2 because Puka Nacua is a proven star. Chris Godwin is hurt. Is Mike Evans going to be? Is he going to be expected to shoulder that number 1 receiver, that heavy load at the age of 31? And I'm stuck with Connor's analogy last week that wide receivers age like milk. Now we haven't seen it in Mike Evans, and I'm not, there has been nothing to suggest that he's going to drop off. But that's my question: what happens if he does? If he starts to decline a little bit? And there's excitement about Emeka Egbuka coming in. I had forgotten, Brian, about Macmillan, who I was highly impressed with last year. He made some huge plays, got some, a huge amount of touchdowns when they needed it as well. Vita Vea as well on the defensive side of the ball is 30 now. Hassan Reddick is 30. Just a couple of those veterans. If you see any of them or a couple of them take a little step back, the margins are quite fine in that division. And as I said, if Atlanta can take a step forward, I think there's a chance that there might be a little bit of a switch in the top of this division.
Caroline Boyle, what's the view from the Sunshine State?
Hillsborough County. 813, stand up. Sorry, it's my little Florida intro there. No, I'm really high, like Brian. I'm very high on the Buccaneers. I think I'm not going to rehash the players that they have on offense, but what I really like is what they've got on defense. A couple of points I'm going to make on some of the players. I mean, they did pick up Hassan Reddick, but I mean, you've got a defense of Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey, Hassan Reddick, Levante David, linebacker, Yaya Diaby, and Antoine Winfield. That's enough to get you to the Super Bowl alone if those dudes stay healthy. They had question marks last year about the secondary. The secondary had a really rough time down the stretch. And what do they do in the draft? They addressed it with the second and third rounds. They picked up Ben Morrison from Notre Dame, and they picked up Jacob Parrish from Kansas State. So they've addressed those big issues that they had. They identified them. They addressed them. The offense is spectacular. We already know that. And I think this is one of the teams that could really go all the way. I think they've got everything there. Baker is in his prime. I don't think the Cohen loss is as big a factor as people might think. I think Baker is really hitting his stride right now, and he's going to have another fantastic season. The question mark for me is Trinster Wharfs is on the PUP, and he may miss. He may be out until October, and that's a big piece at left tackle. Everybody needs a strong left tackle. And he's a really big weapon for the Buccaneers. So him being out for a couple of weeks could be an issue. The secondary was addressed. Can Baker do it again? I believe he can. I think he's going to have another great season. I don't think they're going to miss Liam Cohen as much as people think. The question mark for me is how long will Wirfs be out? Is it a kind of Matt Stafford situation where they're underplaying it and it's not as serious as people are saying? But he's a key cog in this offense. The defense for me needs as much as the additions have added up. They need help. It can't just be the Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey show. So for me, all the rest of those pieces have got to kind of kick in, especially the corners that they got in the draft. But for me, this is a team that, like Brian said earlier, who's going to stand out in the NFC other than the Eagles and the Rams. And again, the Rams we don't know yet. But I'm really big on the Buccaneers. I love Baker. I think the offense is great. Defense should be enough, and I think they're primed for a run all the way.
Shane, just a quick one. Sorry. One of the reasons why I think they have a real shout was because, we'll probably get into the NFC North and we'll talk about the ambitions of the Packers and the Vikings, and obviously the Lions are a no-brainer in terms of being there and thereabouts. I kind of get the sense they're all going to chop each other's heads off over the course of the season, and we mightn't see these 12-3 kind of records going into late December with the Lions and the Packers obviously chasing and the Vikings. I think this is going to be a real competitive tight division, and that leaves an opportunity then for the Bucs if they can win the division in a compelling manner because of the nature of that division. That they could be in a position where they're actually hosting playoff games. I know they lost to the Commanders, but again, you talk about a team a couple of years back that went in and gave the Lions everything they needed, and the Lions just about got over the line in the end. There's absolutely no reason why this team couldn't be thereabouts come championship weekend.
Yeah, I think as we're sitting here, their odds to win a Super Bowl are around the 30-1 mark. That might be an interesting pick for anybody looking ahead. In terms of the division, guys, all right, it's time to name from 4th to 1st what way you think it's going to shake out. Kieran O'Donovan, I'm going to throw it to you first.
It depends on whether Brian has actually backed the Bucs to win the Super Bowl, because if he has, I'm all over it. But no, I think
I'm selling the Kool-Aid tonight, big time with this Bucs.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go and put my head in the line and say the Falcons take the division, but you never know. The Bucs could sneak in and go a long way. The Bucs are going to be number 2. Saints are going to bring up the rear, and that leaves who's third?
Panthers.
Yes, the ever forgettable Panthers. Brian O'Leary.
I have a feeling that Kieran O'Donovan is trying to chase something down here, where he's coming back in next January and saying, "I told you so." In terms of the shock of the season, we'll wait for the season preview.
If I make enough outlandish kind of predictions, one of them is bound to come true, and then I can.
That's usually the way it works out. I imagine. Yeah, wait for the season previews, and you'll see what bizarre situation Kieran Boyle puts us in for this upcoming season in terms of who's going to shock us all, or maybe even Shane comes out with another Colts syndrome, where I go Titans or something bizarre like that. For me, it's going to be this. Look, this one's probably one of the easier ones I think to select over the course of the few weeks in which we're doing these divisional previews. Saints to finish last. Panthers. I'm not sold on them. I think they'll finish through because the Saints are more off-putting. Falcons, and I think by a stretch the Bucs win the division.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little bit different, almost for the sake of being different, but screw it. I'm gonna go obviously Saints last, Falcons third, Panthers going second on a tiebreaker, and then Buccaneers winning the division comfortably. Kieran Boyle, as the Southern resident, you tell us who's going to be Kings of the South.
Shane, I'm matching you. Yeah, I got the Saints last. I got the Falcons in third. I got the Panthers as my surprise of the NFC. I got them in second, just missing the playoffs. And Tampa wins the division.
All right, we'll be interested to hear what everybody here thinks, because these videos are on YouTube. Of course, we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, where there is a prize, by the way, for anybody who wants to tune in to see there are a couple of NFL Game Passes going. But for now, thank you very much for listening to the Irish NFL Show's preview of the NFC South. We'll catch you next weekend with the Eastern Divisions, I think is what we're doing next week. So, we'll talk to you then.